Horses are a very practical means of transportation in Breath of the Wild. Although this type of travel may not be suitable for all terrain types, they definitely help a lot with cross-country trips across the land that make exploring through the plains and roads of Hyrule a breeze. But the thing about horses in this game is that there are a lot of hidden attributes and mechanics about them that most players still don't understand. Like, what exactly does the strength stat mean? How does horse taming and bonding work? And where can someone find all the best horses in the game? Well, fortunately, through doing a lot of in-game research, I was able to find the answers for all these questions plus more, in order to figure out all the hidden mechanics behind these creatures, which will allow us to utilize them as effectively as possible. So with that said, let's get into all the hidden characteristics and stats behind horses in Breath of the Wild. First off, it's important to understand that there are two different types of horses that can be found in the world: gentle and wild. The gentle horses refer to ones that generally have weaker stats, but in turn do not need to be soothed or tamed upon their initial boarding, and these come in spotted varieties, solid light brown, and solid pink. And then there's wild horses, which have much better stats than the latter, and come in all solid varieties minus the light brown and the pink that belong to the gentle. Beyond this, color doesn't determine the stats in any way, so it doesn't matter which type you pick as long as you know the distinction between the two. So given their higher stats, it makes sense that the wild horses are the most sought after in the game, but the only thing stopping most players from getting them early on is the fact that they need to be tamed, which typically requires a lot of stamina. But that's actually a big misconception in itself, as taming wild horses isn't dependent on how much stamina you have, but rather how many times the soothe button is pressed. And for the majority of horses, they only require 15 presses of the button to bring them to a full tame. So as long as you're quick at button mashing, just about any horse can be caught with a single wheel of stamina. There are a couple exceptions to this though, such as the Royal White Stallion requiring 25 presses and the Big Horse requiring 30, but even then, it's still possible to catch these horses in the early game. By mashing the soothe button really hard, I was able to catch the Big Horse with a mere 1 1/5 stamina wheels, which was extremely tiring, but was done so to prove that this horse can be obtained right after the plateau. So now that we know how to tame a horse correctly, how exactly does the bonding mechanic work? Maxing out your bond with the horse should be the first priority when getting one, as it'll allow you to ride without interruptions and customize it at a stable with different saddles and mane types as well. And after doing some testing, there seems to be 3 different ways to increase the bond with the horse. 1. Soothing a horse right after finishing a gallop will increase its bond by 3 points. 2. Soothing a horse right after regaining control will increase it by 5. And 3, which is by far the easiest way, is to simply feed it an apple, which increases it by 10 points. So honestly, you really don't even have to worry about the first 2, as if you feed a horse 10 apples as soon as you get it, its bond will be instantly maxed, which will guarantee a much smoother ride from there on out. But now that we know about taming and bonding with horses, we can go deeper into the actual performance stats of them to figure out how they all work. These stats, which can be viewed at stables, consist of strength, speed, and stamina, and receive a rating on a 5-star level determining their effectiveness. But there seems to be a couple misconceptions on how some of these actually work, along with some other hidden characteristics as well. So let's break down each of them one by one to figure out how they truly function, starting with the strength. Now, a lot of people tend to be confused by this one, as it's not clear if it's referring to a horse's offensive or defensive strength. But in reality, it's just referring to how many maximum hit points a horse has, which differs between the gentle and wild varieties. For gentle, a 1-star horse has 100 HP, 2 is 150, and 3 is 160. And for wild, a 1-star horse has 80 HP, 2 is 110, 3s are actually non-existent for this type, 4s are 240, and finally 5s are 300. This health cannot be increased via the usage of armor like the knight's armor, as it's purely aesthetic. And contrary to popular belief, feeding it food like apples doesn't actually restore its health, as it's only used for the bonding. In actuality, restoring a horse's health is quite simple, because every time the game enters a loading screen or your horse is boarded at a stable, its health always gets reset to its max. So if you ever need to heal a horse in a pinch, saving and reloading the game is actually an effective option. Beyond this, the strength stat doesn't affect the damage output of a horse in any way, as running over an enemy will still always deal a flat 30 damage, and using a melee weapon on a horse will always double its damage, which is true for all horse types in the game. But moving on, the next stat to discuss, speed, is rather self-explanatory, as the higher the stat is, the faster the horse can go. But in order to figure out the exact margins between the levels, I decided to test out the speeds of all horses at both a canter, which is its normal movement speed, and a gallop, its sprinting speed, to figure out how fast each of them truly are. On average, a 2-star is able to canter at 9.8 meters per second and gallop at 14.4, a 3-star canters at 10.5 and gallops at 15.9, a 4-star canters at 13 and gallops at 18.1, and finally, a 5-star canters at 14 and gallops at 18.6. If you notice, for the normal movement speeds, the jump from 3 to 4-star is far more significant than any of the other jumps, with roughly a 25% increase compared to the others, while for the gallops, all the numbers are very similar. If you're wondering how I got these numbers in meters, I used the paragliding minigame to figure out exactly how long a set stretch of land was in Hyrule, and compared it to the distance of the land I tested to get the exact meter per second rating, which explains why the speeds are all in odd decimal numbers, which is something I could possibly cover in a future video. So with this in mind, there's actually two types of mounts that differ from these stats quite a bit. One being the giant horse, as despite being listed as a 2-speed, its big size allows it to canter faster than any other horse in the game, at a rate of 14.8 meters per second. The only downside is that it lacks a galloping ability, but it's still a versatile option if you plan on just cruising the world without having to worry about spurs. The only other mount that can technically move faster, despite not being a horse at all, is the Master Cycle, which can move at a rate of 16.5. which is just about the average speed of a 5-star horse when alternating between cantering and galloping, so it's a good, speedy late game alternative if you don't want to use a horse. But with that said, the only other stat to discuss, stamina, basically doesn't require much of an explanation, as every star refers to one spur that the horse can use to gallop. Beyond this, there are actually two ways in the game that this number can be increased. One, the Ancient Bridle, which permanently gives a horse 2 extra spurs, and 2, feeding a horse an Endura Carrot, which gives a horse 3 temporary spurs that act very similarly to temporary stamina, which only gets consumed if you run out of the normal ones. So having these extra spurs is quite effective if the player is ever trying to run from something in a pinch. So now that we know everything about horse stats and characteristics in this game, there's only one big question left to answer. Where exactly can we find the best horses, and how does their spawning work? Well, fortunately, I didn't have to do much research on this subject before finding a GameFAQs thread by user HylianAngel, which already detailed the system out completely, and I can confirm that this information is 100% correct. According to their map, horses spawn in groups of 3 or 4 at any of these locations, and the color of the dot represents the tier of horses that will spawn, with red groups containing the worst stats and blue containing the best. And interestingly enough, the potential stat values of each horse in a pack are already predetermined. So for an example, all horses in a group 1 pack will spawn as either a 134, 222, 223, or 133, and you'll never catch a horse with any different combo at these locations. If you want a full breakdown on the spawn rates of each location, then feel free to check out the article link below. But for now, we are just going to go over the locations of the best horses in the game, which are the group 4s that spawn at Upland Linder and the Teobob grasslands. These locations do have the potential of spawning weak 223 gentle horses, but the ones that we're really after are the 445s, which are the best stamina horses, 535s, which are the best strength horses, and the 254s, which are the best speed horses in the game. Now, I personally would avoid the 5 strength horses, as they always come with a mere 3 speed, which is rather slow. So your best option is either the 5 speed or stamina ones, but it really comes down to player preference. However, there is one little important thing to know about the stamina horses in this group when it comes to taming, is that unlike the other wild horses that take 15 soothes, this one in specific takes 25 for some odd reason. There's a couple other weird variances like this that I found in my research, like the high stamina horses in group 3s taking 18 soothes instead of 15, along with some HP differences between all the 4 strength horses in the game. But these all seem to be minor, off exceptions to the rest of the rules we mentioned earlier that really don't impact much, but were at least worth a quick mention. But in conclusion, if you only want your personal stable to contain the best horses in the game, I would prioritize 2 of those slots going to the 2 special horses, the royal and big ones, while the other 3 should only be caught in the 2 high tier locations we mentioned earlier for the best stats. If you're looking for a specific stat combo or even color horse in this area, you can always save and reload to completely reroll the horses that spawn there to get a combination that suits your playstyle and aesthetic best. But with that said, that is all the information to discuss about horse stats in Breath of the Wild. For those of you new to the channel, this is part 5 in a series called Stats of the Wild, where we break down the hidden characteristics and mechanics behind all different elements of this game. As I also have other videos like this discussing subjects such as stat buffs, shield surfing, and even elemental weapons that you're more than welcome to check out. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching. A huge shout out to my amazing patrons and YouTube members who help support the channel. If you would like to help me out here for as little as $1 a month, all the links for that will be down in the description below. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.